I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media, and today on Blockchain Interviews we have Calanthia Mei, the co-founder of Masa Finance. Calanthia, welcome to the show and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me here, Ashton.
You're very welcome. I'm really excited to dive into Masa Finance, DeFi, and Souldbound tokens. I would love to kick off our conversation by just hearing a little bit about your background in the blockchain space and how that led up to you getting involved with Masa, and then we'll dive into all the details.
Yeah, absolutely. So personally, I am a first-generation immigrant here in the US. Moved to the country when I was a teenager. When I first moved here, I had no knowledge about how the financial system worked in the US. For example, I had to rebuild my credit score from the scratch. I probably hit overdrafts more time than I'd like to admit because of the various hidden fee structures our banking system has imposed on us. That's the reason why part of my personal missions is to build a more open and transparent and democratized financial system that not only benefits a group of people, but mostly benefits all. And this is reflected in my professional journey as well. Fun fact, when I first started my professional journey, it was in TradFi, but it was a very interesting period of time when the phrase too big to fail was literally coined to describe the bank I was working at. Needless to say, I saw the good, but mostly the bad and the ugly when it comes to how deficient our financial system was, and that inspired me to use technology to really solve for that. I moved over to California and decided to use technology to solve a lot of deficiencies I saw in the financial system, hop onto the fintech trend at the early wave of this generation of fintech, became a founding team member of PayPal's venture capital arm. And that's where I got my first exposure into crypto as well. A lot of people didn't know this, but PayPal actually experimented with using cryptocurrency as a form of payment at Braintree, which is a payment processing arm at PayPal in 2014.
Wow.
Back then, I don't think the adoption was significant. That's the reason why the project got sunsetted after a couple of years. But then later on, PayPal also tried to use a PayPal wallet to trade crypto, integrating with Coinbase and other larger crypto companies to do funds in and funds out, helping with the on-ramp problem. And I was a part of the working group solving some of the challenges.
Wow, incredible background. And I hear this often where it's, the personal and entrepreneurial journey where you get into traditional finance, you see all the things wrong with it, and then you're like, you know what, this is my personal mission to fix this, not just to better myself, but to help everybody fix all these problems. So that's great to hear. And I am familiar with sort of a little bit on the history of PayPal, and they were definitely a little early, but now it looks like they have put Bitcoin in there, and maybe now is the right time. And a lot has happened in crypto since then, and there's so much to talk about with DeFi and NFTs, and there's much more to come still. We're still very early, but a lot more since 2014. Now, with all of that said, in your journey getting into Masa Finance, can you talk about what the main mission is of Masa and how you're looking at solving those problems you talked about?
Yeah, so at Masa, we're trying to bring the next billion users into Web3. It sounds like a very ambitious goal, and we're indeed very ambitious. So how do we do that? We're trying to deliver real-world utility to the next billion people. And we don't have 1 billion Web3 natives yet. That's the reason why we're trying to expand the scope of our real-world utility to also include people who may not even know how blockchain works. We want to be able to provide utility to them. And exactly what is that real-world utility we're trying to provide? It is very similar to my co-founder Brendan and my personal story. We want to provide access to capital to people across the world by creating a financial identity on-chain that is fair, more transparent, and more democratized. Wow. So that's what we do here at Masa Finance. We're trying to be Web3's first Souldbound identity protocol by giving people access to identity online on-chain, but also giving developer an opportunity to build Souldbound identity in the blockchain world as well.
Amazing. And I've seen a few different companies sort of working on a decentralized Web3 identity. I feel like there's a lot to go to sort of make it mainstream, but there's a lot of issues with sort of Web 2 identities and how identity works on the internet right now. So I feel like there's a lot to improve on. Where do you start with, do you start with, these are the worst, identity fraud and these are sort of the issues, or do you just start from scratch and like, let's build this into a decentralized protocol and sort of 10x how identity works in Web 2?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Ashton, when it comes to identity being such an abstract concept. I think as a developer, you'll be so drawn to the concept of identity because it is a really hard problem to solve for. But in order for identity to have adoption, you have to be very, very smart in exactly what kind of utility you provide and what kind of use cases you go to market with first. That's exactly the reason why my co-founder Brandon and I chose lending as the first use case, giving people across the globe access to capital in a more fair and democratized way. I'll give you an example here. We're still on the testnet and haven't launched on the mainnet yet, but we have close to 70,000 users. Wow. They were attracted to Masa Finance because they want to get access to DeFi loans. Simple as that. Access to capital at a global scale, it is still a very hard to solve problem, and it has real demand. That's the reason why we decided to launch that as the very first use case of Masa Souldbound identity. However, when we were building the Masa Souldbound identity in the lending use case, we realized that the picks and shovels, the infrastructure was really missing. There was no identity management layer that allows developer to build the Masa Souldbound identity or whatever, the Ashton Souldbound identity on chain. That's the reason why we are in the process of externalizing our Souldbound identity infrastructure so that Ashton, you'll be able to build your Ashton Souldbound identity on chain, and then Rachel will be able to build hers, and Calanthia, I will be able to build mine. We're trying to offer that as a developer program. It's part of Masa contributing to the public good in Web3.
Wow, that's incredible to hear about the 70,000 people already getting on board. And as you mentioned, there's so much you can do with decentralized identity. You have to start somewhere with a good use case. I feel like having way down the road, decades down, we'll have digital passports and driver's license, and the government will be involved. But like that's way down the road. That's not the first use case. But getting access to capital in the same way that Bitcoin had its early use cases in gaming and commerce and not for sort of every day. I feel like people that are unbanked or underbanked that need to get access to capital using DeFi, having a Web3 identity to sort of build credit or have other benefits beyond that, I feel like that's a great use case, especially in developing countries. Is that sort of 100%. Where you're targeting in underdeveloped countries to start building a credit for loans?
So that's where we started. We offered Masa in developing countries or emerging economies, and we got a lot of demand. We got a lot of traction on the waitlist. People want to get access to capital, but that is a global problem. It is a way bigger problem than most of people realize. Across the globe, there are 3.3 billion people who are credit invisible. And what does that mean? That means that you are credit worthy. However, because of the lack of financial infrastructure in the jurisdiction you live in, you do not have a good way to represent your credit worthiness. And as a result, you are not able to get access to capital as your credit worthiness would actually demand. That's the reason why I find DeFi to be fascinating, right? Because you're essentially creating a global debt capital market whereby lenders, borrowers, and liquidity providers can truly participate from everywhere. And they can be retail, they can be institutional. Capital efficiency is being optimized. And then access is being opened up to people across the globe. If you have a financial identity that can represent your credit worthiness, that is.
Yeah, no, I can see how having global access and retail institution all sort of in one spot would make the capital so much more efficient and break down the barriers of countries and jurisdictions, sort of having individual jurisdiction over certain areas. So I'm really excited to see this grow out. Now, I saw through Masa Finance's platform something about soulbound NFTs, and I've heard the term a few times where you sort of tie something to oneself that's untradeable, and obviously identity is a great example of that. Is this the new technology that you're utilizing to create the Web3 identities?
Yeah, 100%. So Ashton, you may recall in May, Vitalik published a paper called Decentralized Society, in which he championed the concept of a Souldbound token and Souldbound identity. So that's exactly the core technical concept we're building Masa Souldbound identity upon. And I'll give you a super non-technical explanation of that. Imagine you're building an onion, and then there are different layers to an onion. And each layer of onion would represent a data attribute. It can be your credit score, credit worthiness. It can be your personal address, your on-chain activity in certain decentralized exchanges. And then adding all the layers together of the onion, that represents your on-chain identity. So that's exactly what we're building here at Masa Souldbound Identity. Each layer can be permissioned to be viewed by whoever requests it. For instance, let's say, Ashton, you're a lender and you want to check out my Web3 credit score, which is one layer of the onion here. You'll be able to request to see one layer of onion. I'll be able to sign my wallet to permission you to see my financial score in Web3, and then you'll be able to view it. We find this non-transferable NFT in the format of a Souldbound identity to be the future of on-chain identity.
Wow, incredible. And from what I understand, it is like an NFT, and when people hear NFTs, they think Bored Ape, CryptoPunks, it's digital art. But this is totally different.
Yeah.
Are they using the same underlying technology, or like how it can get confusing for people when they hear like, oh, it's an NFT, and you're like, well, I thought that was art. What do you mean my identity is an NFT as well? Do you think that's a barrier to overcome?
I'm super bullish on expanding the use case of NFT as well. I'm very grateful for the artists and the creators who brought the name NFT into the mainstream conscious, right? Now everyone knows about NFT, knows about the Bored Ape, the famous artists who are trying to leverage blockchain to engage creative activities. However, I do think that in order to inspire the next bull market in crypto, we need to extend use cases of not only NFT, but other crypto technology to deliver real world utility. And using non-transferable NFT as a good way to represent your on-chain identity, to me, that is a really, really good way to expand the use cases of NFT. And we are also, giving you a quick sneak peek here. We did something quite clever a couple months ago. If you recall, the ENS domain names, I'm sure you remember, it's still pretty fresh on everyone's memory. For those audience members who do not recall ENS domain name, imagine 6 months ago when you're on Twitter, when everyone changed their Twitter handle to Calanthia.eth, Ashton.eth, that's ENS domain name. I thought it was super clever to use a very easy to understand and very portable phrase to represent your Ethereum wallet address. What we did here at Masa is that we allow you to create a simple SOL name to represent your Masa Souldbound identity. For instance, in this case, I'll be Calanthia.sol, which would point to my Masa Souldbound identity, and you'll be Ashton.sol, and you can, of course, have your fun internet name as well. So that is actually an NFT that we have leaned into quite heavily in the past couple weeks, and the Web3 community absolutely loved it. People love getting a special, unique, and rare SOL name, and we plan to do some fun airdrop very soon too. Wow, very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that, and it's great to add a little more soul into the blockchain world and into finance as well. I feel like traditional finance, some might say it's soulless, so I think this will really help with that. Now, you mentioned you had a lot of people on the wait list and you're in the testnet phase. Can you talk a little bit more exactly about where Masa Finance is at right now and sort of what are the next steps in getting to that next stage of the launch? Yeah, absolutely. So far we have launched on Celos testnet and the Ethereum Girly testnet, we have around 70,000 users, mostly got attracted to our community because they're excited by the aspect of access to capital, but also building your identity on chain. In the next couple of weeks, we are launching on the Ethereum mainnet, which is the biggest launch we have for this year. That will be tremendously exciting. We have a lot of marketing activities planned around it, including the so-named airdrops I mentioned earlier. That is going to be major. And then next up, towards the end of this year, we're going to formally launch our developer program, which is equally exciting. Again, we're trying to externalize our SBT infrastructure to allow developers and projects to build their own Souldbound identity. It is fascinating how many ways an identity can be used in the Web3 world, and we want to be able to support that kind of momentum. We are in the process of integrating with the first cohort of developers and partners. Cannot share more, but please do stay tuned.
Very cool. And for those people that sort of want to stay tuned and hear about this upcoming airdrop as well, is it still possible to get onto that extensive waitlist, or how else can they follow along with the updates from Masa?
Yeah, absolutely. You can follow us on @Masa5 on Twitter. You can follow us and join our Discord community. We have a very vibrant and global Discord community of a few thousand members. We share daily updates. We have very fun memes, so please be part of it. You can also go to our website, masa.finance, to learn more.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Calanthia. I will leave those links in the description box below as well. All the best with shaping the future of Web3 identities, with Souldbound tokens, and helping out the DeFi industry, and just helping out people get involved in finance that are unbanked and underbanked around the whole world. I really do appreciate this initiative, and let's follow up in the near future.
Thank you so much, Ashton. Thanks for having me here.